What's up guys, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to edit your photos using Lightroom. So you can get your photos from looking like this to looking like this in the easiest way possible. So I'm not going to be using any presets. I'm not trying to sell any presets to you. I'll teach you how to also make your presets. Let's say your favorite photographer, you might see how their photos look and then you're trying to get that look. It's a very easy way to get your photos looking really good, and you can actually do that using your mobile phone. I'm going to be editing using my iPad, but then the whole concept and the idea is exactly the same as on your phone. All right, let's get into it. I have lots of images already uploaded here, but then basically if you want to start editing, you're going to have to add the photo to Lightroom. So you can add the photo by clicking on the bottom right corner. There is a plus icon, so you click that. So you click on camera roll and then import your photos to Lightroom. So I've already gotten the photos that I need up here. This is the first photo and this is the second photo. So personally, when I want to edit my photos, I want to start off with the editing of the light. So basically I try to follow the order that Lightroom has already set on here. It's very simple and it's easy to follow through and it's easy to explain. First of all, I'm going to click on the lights section, and as you can see here, we can adjust so many different things: the exposure, contrast, highlights, and all that. As we can see, the highlights are a bit overexposed in this photo, so I don't think I need to increase the exposure because that just makes the whole photo seem too washed out. So I would undo that. To reset the value, you just need to double tap on the circle and then it resets. So that's a quick tip for you. Important. All right, so next you have the contrast. If you shift it towards the left side, it brings the shadows and the highlights closer, so the highlights aren't going to be so bright and the shadows aren't going to be so dark. I'm going to keep the contrast at 0. Then I'll do the highlights. So for me, I'm going to keep the whites at like 0 because it's already a pretty bright image. Then for the blacks, I'm going to drop the blacks a bit. So I'm going to drop it to about -35. The shadows, I'm going to drop the shadows as well just a little bit, because if I drop it too much, the whole face becomes darker. So I'd like to drop the shadows just a bit to about 21. The highlights, I might be able to bump up the highlights a bit more, but not too much. I'm just going to keep it just like that. So I guess that is good enough for the lights, but there's another important part that is really helpful, and that is the curves. So if you notice in the light section, there is at the top right corner, there is this, which is the curves. So you can actually adjust different curves. I'm trying to make this tutorial a bit basic, so I'm not going to go too in depth into curves. If you want to know more about curves, let me know in the comment section and I might be able to answer your questions, or I'll make a separate video on curves. For this one, I'm just gonna do a very simple process of, adjusting the curves. There is a kind of look that I always try to go for, and that is like a more cinematic look. Basically what these curves do is that you can make some fine adjustments to the lights and the darks in your photo. Anything that is more towards the top right corner of the curves is the lights, and anything that is more towards the bottom left corner is the darks. So you can make points along the lines and then adjust accordingly. So for me, what I like to do is that I like to bump up the darkest points because that gives it like a more softer feel to the image. It's not too punchy. Another thing that most people will tell you to do, and I also agree with, is that you should try to make like a gentle S curve. Like if I was to like bump this up, you just notice like, okay, this is not it. So I'll just undo that. And yeah, you just want to like a very gentle S curve. What I'm going to do next is going to be the color. So this is like what I would say is the most important, and this is where Lightroom really shines in terms of like photo editing apps, because for this you can really play around with the colors, the tones, and make a very, very unique image. You might take a photo and then the white part is looking like a little blue or like too warm. White balance just like fixes that. So what I can do is to click the color picker, I think. So yeah, so once you pick the color, and you can move this over to the widest point in your image, And once you do that, hit the check mark, and that automatically adjusts your image for you. So as you can see, I think the white balance was perfect in this image, so there was barely any adjustments. But in some situations when you take a photo, it's going to make that huge adjustment. I want to make this picture a bit more interesting. I can also play around with the temperature. If I move it over to the left, it can be warmer. Sorry, if I move it over to the right, it can be warmer. If I move it to the left, it can be cooler. So I can find that nice balance to make sure that it's a nice picture. Alright, so I can also move the tint, move it over to the greener area, or I can move it over to the purple area. So I think I like the purpley look. I'm gonna leave it at that. Then vibrance just, you know, increases the saturation in the mid-tones of your image. So there's the highlights, there's the shadows, and there's the mid-tones. So the vibrance increases the saturation over there. The saturation obviously increases the saturation of the whole image. Alright, so I like to have my saturation not too far up because I like a softer, cooler look in my photos. Next up, we're going to go to another interesting part of the editing, which is the color mix. So this is another good tool in Lightroom where you can pick the exact color that you want to edit. So for instance, like if I want to edit the colors, I can select the red color. It's currently on the red, so I'll select red, and you can actually shift the hue to like more of an orange color. So I'm just gonna move this over just a little bit. I don't want it to look completely different, but then you can actually warp the color a whole lot if you want to. So I'll just leave this at 20. You can also bump the saturation. I'm gonna pop up the saturation just a little bit as well, and the luminance you can make it darker or lighter. So I'll just put the luminance right there at plus. No, I'm gonna put it down to like a negative. And this is all just like personal preference. Your photos don't have to look like this, but then this is just like a simple guide to kind of, you know, give you an idea on how to edit your photos. Alright, so next up I'm gonna check the oranges, and for this color, this is actually where most of the skin tones are, so you don't want to go too crazy on this part because this is gonna make this is gonna make or break the image. So you can either have, you know, really red skin tones, or you can have like really green like an alien. So I'd like to have that more of in the center. You can actually increase the saturation to make their skin tones pop a little more, and then you can also work with the luminance. Some situations can make it darker like a tan, or lighter. So I would just leave this as 0 as well. Alright, so next you have the yellows. What I like to do, is there any yellow in this image? So sometimes it's not going to have a huge impact in your photos, but then some other times it's going to have a really big impact in your photos. I'm going to move the hue of the yellows to the orange just to create like more of a balance in the photo. And then the greens, there's barely any change for the greens except in the water. So I'd like to move the greens over to the blue to make the water look more blue. So the thing is, like, you know, some people, they might see some of these Instagram photographers and then they see the ocean and they're like, oh wow, the ocean's so blue. The thing is, you can actually make the oceans blue in Lightroom. So you can totally change the color of the ocean to make it even nicer or bluer just by using this tool in Lightroom. Next up, I'm gonna go over to the teals, or the aqua, pardon me. For the aquas, there's barely any change that you have to make, but then I'll just like leave this as neutral. Then for the blues, I'm gonna drop the blues and make them a little bit more aqua. I'm also gonna bump up the saturation of the blues because it seems a little bit muted. So I'm gonna pop up the saturation there, and the luminous can be a little bit darker because like I think this is good. And one thing I like to do is to always check the before and after. So to check that, you just need to hold on the image. So just, you know, tap on the image and hold, and then you can see like we've made quite a bit of change to this image. It might not look like we're making huge changes. By the time you see the image you started with, you can definitely see there is a huge change. All right, so next up we have the purples. So I'm just gonna move the purples over to the blues, and for the pinks, I'm gonna move that over to the red. All right, so I think I'm happy with that. You can also play around with the saturation and the luminance in any of these, just to, you know, work with it and know which suits you better. So this is basically the edit for the colors. If you can see, most of the difference and most of the change came from, you know, changing the colors, the saturation, brightening up the image, and then you can really change it up. So for instance, if I was to make more of a change, I can actually switch up the temperature and make it a lot cooler or a lot warmer. So you can do a lot with this section of the editing. So next up, we're going to go to the effects tab. So the simple things I like to do is to increase the texture just a little bit, not too much, because if it's too much, then your photo starts to look fake. So we don't want that. If you move this texture all the way over, you just notice like it's too harsh, it's too up in your, like, I really don't like it. So I'm just gonna undo that. Just a +11 texture is good. Then the clarity, I'm gonna drop the clarity down, or no, I'm gonna actually lift up the clarity to about this point. All right, that's a little too much, so I'm gonna drop it down to about 14. So what this clarity does is that it just makes the image clearer. It makes the darker parts dark, it preserves the midtones, and it makes the lighter part light. I'll just keep this as low as possible because we've already done a bit of edit previously. All right, so dehaze, this dehaze tool is just to either add or, you know, remove any haze that might be in your photo. Then the vignette tool, this is one I will probably not use in this image because I try to like keep my photos more simplistic and minimalistic. But for instance, if you wanted to use a vignette, you would want to like make it to about maybe a -50, and then I would move the midpoint closer in. The roundness, you can play around with that. And then for feather, I just bump up the feathering to about 100, so it's like a soft vignette that just goes across the image. But for now, I will not use the vignette, and I think it is, you know, just good enough for this photo. Real quick, so there is the grain part. So sometimes I like to add a bit of grain because it adds that texture, and it can add more of a nostalgic, or brings more character to your photo. So sometimes I like to add a bit of grain to this, so I would just like bump this up to like maybe a 14. It's a light grain, it's not too heavy. And then, but you can also like increase the size of the grain and the roughness of the grain, so you can really see what it can do. So, but for this, I'm just not, actually I'm not going to use the grain for this image. We're keeping it simple and easy. All right, so there's more. There's the detail. You can actually bump this up. This is the sharpening. So you can also work with some of these other tools, which might be really helpful. But for this image, I don't think we need to work with any of the rest. This is the preset section. These are a couple presets that I made before, but I'm going to show you how you can make your own presets. It's very simple using this Lightroom Mobile. Just stay tuned for that, and later on I'll be showing you how to make your own presets. Next is the cropping. For instance, if you want to post this image on Instagram, what you're going to want to do is to select the aspect ratio of 4:5. So this is the Instagram's cropping ratio, so you can move this around until you're happy with the framing. So I'm happy with this. Obviously you can rotate, you can flip the image back and forth, you can also straighten the image. This is also a very important tool, the straighten tool, because once you click on straighten, then it automatically looks at the lines, maybe the angles, tries to straighten your image just in case it might just be a little bit warped. So this is a very good tool that I use all the time. All right, once that is done, you just hit done at the bottom. There are a couple tools over here which are the premium tools, but obviously I said I'm going to try to keep this very basic and simple, so I'm not going to go into the premium tools. And the truth about it is that you actually don't need some of these premium tools to be able to get really good edits using Lightroom Mobile. So moving on to the next step. So one huge thing I'm going to give you, a tip I'm going to give you is, how to save lots of time when editing. So first thing is that this tool right here is you can apply your adjustments from your previous photo. So for instance, like if I want to move on to the next photo, it's like a blank photo, I have made no adjustments to it. I'll click on that right there and it says apply from previous photos. I can either choose to apply only the adjustments, or I can apply everything that I did to the previous photo. So what I'm gonna do is just the adjustments, and you can see that there's definitely a huge change to that image. All you need to do after that is just to edit just maybe the exposures and the lights over here. But then that is the first tool and the first tip I'm going to give you. The second tip, and really importantly, is how to make your own presets. So if you want to make your own presets, it's really simple. You just need to click on the three dots at the top right of the screen. Once you click on that, you'll see create presets. So I'll just like title this as probably tutorial and save. So you can actually save this as one of your presets. So anytime you go back and you want to edit any photos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset all of the edits on here. So to reset, you click on this and you can click the original. So it's going to reset the photo to its original. You click apply, and yeah, this is also another tip too, and this is how you can reset the photo. So if you want to apply the presets, you just click on this icon right here, and then you can see all the presets that I've made, including the tutorial preset. So you can actually click on whichever presets you find better. I think the Punchy Night preset, I don't know where that name came from, but I guess it works. I think this is a good preset for this photo, but if I need to make any other adjustments, all I need to do is to hit done, and I will go into this settings and probably work with the exposure or the lights, the contrast, and work with it until I am satisfied. So I think this is a good image as well. And yeah, this is basically how I edit my photos using Lightroom. It's very simple, very easy to understand. You can get that edit done easily on your phone or on maybe your tablet. It's very, very simple. Like I said, I'm not trying to sell any presets or anything to you, but then if you really found this video helpful, make sure you leave a like and consider subscribing if it really helped you, and if you want to see more of my content. And also, if you want to see more from the shoot that I took some of these photos, you can actually subscribe, and then I have the videos there, so you can also click. I'm gonna put it up here or here. So if you want to see some of those videos, you can click there and watch how I got the photos. All right, just want to say thank you so much for sticking around with me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.